Chapter 11. In the darkness, I stood over her sleeping figure, unable to step away, yet knowing I had to. I needed to leave and hunt. The thirst was and always had been an undeniable force. This is for her safety, I told myself. I needed to remain in control at all times, and the distraction of my tortured throat was a risk that must be subdued. The waxing crescent moon cast very little light, but Bella's visage was alight with a glow from within. Her skin radiated vibrant warmth, making the air around her shimmer with an amber-hued light. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the scalding scent of her, willing her every essence to permeate me, body, mind, and soul. This woman, this fragile human, had given me hope in my land of night. She was my midnight sun, the light of my existence. Only since she had rescued me from my suicide attempt with the Volture had I begun to have hope. I did not understand, yet I could no longer deny. If a creature as good and pure as Bella could love a monster like me, then maybe I could be worthy of that love. I would spend every second of my day trying, and if I truly had a soul, I would dedicate its salvation to her, for she, the greatest blessing in my life, had saved me. My love and anxiety twisted into an uncomfortable knot in my stomach as I penned a short note. As soundly as she had been sleeping of late, it was unlikely she would ever read those words. However, I could not leave her alone without an explanation, should she awaken before my return. My lips twisted into a small, satisfied smile as I read her name before setting the note down next to her. Mrs. Cullen. I would never tire of hearing or seeing her new name. Mrs. Cullen. I'm hoping you won't wake and notice my absence, but if you should, I'll be back very soon. I've just gone to the mainland to hunt. Go back to sleep, and I'll be here when you wake again. I love you. With my body aching and my throat constricting, I pressed one final kiss to her forehead and fled from the room. The pain and anxiety grew tenfold before I had even set foot on the boat's deck. A cursory check was all I needed to assure myself that it was refueled, thanks to Gustavo, and ready for service. I put the throttle to the stop, exulting in the wild thrill of skimming over the rough ocean waves. Maintaining control required my entire focus, as the small craft was launched into the air by a large, ramp-like swell. I was truly testing my reflexes and control, something I never did while in Bella's company. The tension in my arms, and the feel of the yacht's engine growling with power, helped to ease the physical pain of separation. At close to 90 knots, the trip back to the mainland was significantly faster than before, and I was drifting into the boat slip in Rio de Janeiro within 2 hours. Dark as it was, nobody witnessed my inhuman speed as I flitted to the fuel station, filled a portable tank, and darted back to the boat, refueling it for my return trip. As an afterthought, I stowed an extra fuel container in the boat, thinking that Bella might want to make a trip into Rio de Janeiro to sample the nightlife before the cleaning crew's next visit. I glanced around the deserted marina once more before running silently westward. The Corcovado loomed over the city, crowned by the statue of Christ the Redeemer. While the rocky mountain was dark and ominous, the statue was lit from below by dozens of spotlights. Wispy clouds surrounded the base of the statue. It seemed to be floating in space. It was after midnight, and the streets were almost empty. I stuck to the shadows, darting forward when the way was clear. Occasionally, I glanced upward at the brilliant monument, wondering at the faith of millions who traveled here every year to pay homage to their Savior. It was a discomforting thought, the idea of a man so powerful he could influence the minds of millions, even 2,000 years after his life. Not even the oldest vampire I knew had been around so long, and not even Aro could claim a fraction of this man's charisma and worldwide impact. Carlyle, while not aligned with any one particular faith system, held the Christian creed in high regard, and his faith in a supreme, benevolent being was stoic and unshakable. I wished for a fraction of his faith, some sort of consolation in this twilight existence. I willfully dragged my thoughts away from missing Bella and my spiritual musings. Several minutes later, I was free from the oppressive thoughts, sounds, and scents of thousands of human beings. I left the murmuring minds behind me as I ran swiftly through the trees of the Tijuca Forest, an Atlantic rainforest reserve immediately adjacent to the city. Before Bella, I never would have dreamed of hunting in such close proximity to humans, but the control I had been forced to learn in her presence made the scent of other humans only a passing, if slightly painful, temptation. Emmett and Jasper would expect a detailed account of the game and hunting experience here, and I didn't plan to disappoint them. I passed over many trails, thick with the sweet scent of humans, but I had only penetrated a few hundred yards into the dense growth before a musky scent caught my attention. It was similar to that of a mountain lion, but sweeter and heavier, a pleasant surprise. I cast off all surface thoughts and allowed my senses to draw in the sounds and smells of the forest. Millions of mosquitoes and other flying insects created an instant buzz. 3 light-sounding hearts beat towards the north, accompanied by the sound and scent of fresh-flowing water, a stream. The rhythm was familiar, probably a small variety of deer. I continued to focus. A breeze from the northwest brought a stronger dose of the earlier scent, and I raced, ghost-like, in that direction. Subtle at first, a steady thrumming permeated my consciousness. As I drew closer, I took to the trees. The branches grew at angles from the trunks. Unlike the flexible, horizontal branches of the evergreens in Washington, they did not offer the same springy propulsion as I jumped from tree to tree, but the dangling vines provided plenty of entertainment. I had a mental image of Emmett, dressed like Tarzan, swinging wildly through the canopy. I chuckled silently to myself, but quickly refocused as I drew close to my prey. I first spotted the great cat draped languidly over a branch, yawning wildly. It had never heard me, nor caught my scent. I paused to admire its feline grace and its inky black pelt. A panther, gorgeous and lethal. The panther stretched out one foreleg, spreading its massive paw with talon-like claws bared. If I were not in such a hurry, I would have taken my time with the hunt, but I longed to return to Isle Esme. With a fluid pounce, I landed on the cat's branch, and sank my teeth into the sinewy neck before it could do more than flinch. Warm blood washed down my throat, cooling the burning fire, and making all of my senses roar with a rush of energy. My sense of smell had not lied. This was the most pleasant meal I had tasted in years, infinitely more palatable than the deer and elk we subsisted on much of the time. All too soon, the body was drained of blood, and I released the empty carcass. The thirst returned almost immediately, so I reluctantly turned to the first heartbeats I sensed, determined to sate my thirst completely before returning to the island. I wrinkled my nose in disgust as I neared the small herbivores, but I steadied my resolve and finished my hunt quickly and cleanly. The return trip to Isle Esme was much slower. Strong winds tore across the ocean's surface, molding the water into angry waves that frothed and broke around the low prow of my boat. My impatience grew and grew as the sun rose before me. I forced the throttle forward once, only to be met by an angry cracking in the prow, so I brought it back again with a growl. The winds decreased rapidly as the atmosphere heated up, and the air was warm and heavy with humidity by the time I docked and secured the boat. As soon as I killed the engine, the warm reassurance of Bella's heartbeat mended the ache in my spirit. I glanced up at the sky, furious that nature had conspired to keep me away from Bella for longer than expected, 2 agonizing hours longer. The sun shone, brilliant and uncaring, already climbing toward its zenith. I ran my hand through my hair, detangling the snarls from my windy passage, as I quickly negotiated the sandy path to the house. I was greeted by the hours-old scent of cooking oil and lively music playing on the TV, which was frozen on the menu of the movie from the previous day. All of the windows were open, but the air was still uncomfortably warm. I was dismayed when I saw Bella, her face and hair damp with sweat, where she lay on the sofa. Tenderly, I grabbed her in my arms, caressing her forehead with one cool hand. "I'm sorry. So much for thoroughness. I didn't think about how hot you would be with me gone. I'll have an air conditioner installed before I leave again." Bella barely registered my presence before she was struggling for my embrace. Her face was panicked, and I released her in shock. "Excuse me," she gasped. Her face was drained of all color. "Bella!" She ran from me without another word. her hand clasped firmly over her mouth. I was one step behind her. I felt so helpless, watching her retching violently into the toilet. All I could do was hold her hair and wait for the fit to pass. Her eyes overflowed with tears, and she gasped for breath between heaves. I couldn't contain my worry, and pressed for her to speak. "Bella, what's wrong?" "Damn rancid chicken," she moaned, after several more shuddering breaths. "Are you all right?" I was skeptical. I had smelled the fried chicken upon my arrival, but as unpleasant as the smell was to me, it had not smelled rancid. "Fine, it's just food poisoning. You don't need to see this. Go away," she panted weakly. Whether she was trying to spare me the unpleasantness, or she was suffering from some superficial human emotion like embarrassment, I wasn't about to leave her alone in her present state. "Not likely, Bella." "Go away," she moaned again. She pushed weakly against me as she flushed the toilet and stumbled to the sink to rinse out her mouth. I could hardly believe the transformation that had taken place in my brief absence. Yesterday, Bella had fairly glowed. Now her skin was sweaty, pale, and mottled with pink patches on her cheeks. I had seen her ill with colds, injured and in hospital beds, but I had never seen her look so ill. Even her hair had lost some of its luster. I carried her gently to our bedroom, setting her down as carefully as I could. She leaned into my embrace as I held her gingerly. "Food poisoning?" While not a practicing physician, I was instinctively skeptical of her hasty self-diagnosis. "Yeah," Bella choked. Even her voice had lost its musical timbre. "I made some chicken last night. It tasted off, so I threw it out. But I ate a few bites first." "How do you feel now?" I held my hand to her forehead. Narrowing my eyes, I estimated her temperature. Almost 100 degrees, I was sure. I assessed her symptoms, considering heat stress as the most likely culprit. Guilt, a feeling I had missed those last several days, wormed its way back into my stomach again. "Pretty normal. A little hungry, actually." I appraised her silently, noting her improved color and even breathing. Considering the possibility of heat stress, I insisted she remain in bed and sip a large glass of cold water. When she seemed to handle that, and her temperature dropped to a more acceptable level, I fried 3 eggs over medium. I watched every movement she made, looking for any sign of sickness, but she seemed to be in good health again, just fatigued from her ordeal. We retired to the couch, and I turned on CNN. Bella's sudden sickness had made me uncomfortably aware of our isolation and her vulnerability so far from real medical aid. Watching the pre-recorded headlines was reassuring in a way. It brought the world closer again. Bella was so calm and relaxed, laying across my lap. I stroked her hair absently, considering how I would handle a medical emergency if she really was injured. I wasn't getting any closer to a comfortable solution when Bella stirred. She twisted her body to kiss me, and I leaned down with a small smile, always eager to feel her lips on mine. We were still inches apart when she lurched out of my lap and sprinted for the kitchen sink. Again I held her hair, but the nagging sense that something was very wrong pursued me. Her temperature was not elevated now, so I had to rule out heat stress. My book knowledge offered no help here. Maybe we should go back to Rio, see a doctor. Someone who could do more than watch her helplessly. She shook her head vehemently as she walked carefully to the bathroom. "I'll be fine right after I brush my teeth," she assured me. I sat back down on the couch, not watching the screen, just focusing on the sounds of Bella brushing her teeth, then digging through her suitcase in the bathroom. Then silence. Several moments passed before I decided to check on her. My gentle knock startled her, and she dropped something. "Are you well? Did you get sick again?" I waited anxiously for her to reassure me. "Yes and no." Her strangled reply did little to settle my anxiety. "Bella, can I please come in?" "Okay," she responded hesitantly. Her voice sounded lost, bewildered. I opened the door slowly and stepped around to face her. Panic quickly overran the guilt I had been feeling. Her eyes were staring blankly, her face pale and cold, her body frozen in a sitting position next to her suitcase. I sat next to her, feeling her forehead, although I could already tell her temperature was normal. Her pulse was weak, and she exhibited many of the signs of shock. I started to consider an infection, or internal bleeding of some sort, but my heightened senses could only pick up a faint fluttering and warmth in her abdomen. I cursed myself for not having the will and self-control to practice medicine alongside Carlyle. In the face of a real problem, I was utterly worthless. "What's wrong?" I questioned, hoping she would give me more detailed symptoms to help me.
"How many days has it been since the wedding?"
she finally whispered. Her question seemed completely random, and I responded without thinking. 17. Bella, what is it? Her lips moved silently, counting. She held up a finger to halt my half-formed protest. Several seconds later, she paused, her brow furrowed in concentration, and then she began counting again. "Bella, I'm losing my mind over here," I hissed frantically. My breathing was strained, and my head pounded with the knowledge that something was terribly wrong, and I was completely helpless to act against it. Bella's frame shook slightly, her throat convulsed, and she reached shakily for an object in her suitcase. When she held it up, a small blue box of tampons, I was completely baffled. "What? Are you trying to pass this illness off as PMS?"
"No,"
she choked on the words.
"No, Edward. I'm trying to tell you that my period is 5 days late."
My face, my whole body was frozen as my mind processed the implications of this fact.
"I don't think I have food poisoning," she finished shakily.
5 days late. Could she be pregnant? Was that even possible? No vampire had ever impregnated his mate, but how many vampires had actually mated with a human? Libby Showman. The name hissed through my thoughts, along with the cursed word. Flickers of Cora's memories and fears darted in and out of my head. The pregnant girl in the jungle, screaming, pain. No, it can't be true. It can't. Or can it? My mind was severed from my body by this horrifying conclusion. I floated in a vacuum, suspended from all sensation. I was blind, unable to hear, feel, taste, or smell. A small analytical part of my mind registered shock. Any sensory input at this point, and my mind would fracture from the strain. There was no time. Time is a measurement of change. Its passage is something we measure and track, but never truly control. Even time had deserted me. There was no change, no end to the numbing darkness that overpowered me. I was caught in a maelstrom, with no hope of breaking free, surrounded by blackness. All sensation deserted me. Even my memories flitted away. They were incompatible with the existence in this whirling vortex of panic-induced night. Alone and terrified, I drifted. Something. Ringing. Ringing. The sound came from a great distance, echoing hollowly in the anesthetized passage of my splintered psyche. Ringing. A voice. Sweet and musical, but muffled in the darkness. I focused all of my strength on that sound. There was something important. Something I loved was in trouble. No, someone. Bella. Isabella. My Bella. My love. With her name came a fear so intense, so complete that I choked on it. I was alone in the darkness, with a vision of a face so beautiful it would make angels weep, and the face was crumbling in shock and pain, and I could not go to her. I had no body, only my mind, stranded in an icy wasteland of terror.
"Weird. This is going to sound crazy. Look, I know it's way too early for any of this. Maybe I am crazy. But I'm having bizarre dreams, and eating all the time, and crying and throwing up, and I swear something moved inside me just now." Those words forced my mind back into my frozen body with a painful snap. I had to find the answer. Alice, Carlyle. Names, faces, memories came rushing back. A baby. No, not a baby. Not human. A monster. An aberration. An anthemum. Carlyle. I needed to speak to Carlyle. My hand shot out, reaching for my cell phone. I think Edward wants to talk to you," Bella mumbled.
Put him on." I could hear the buzzing reply, distorted and delayed by the satellite connection. "Is it possible?" My mouth felt alien. I had trouble forming words, as if my lips had not made a sound in centuries. Is it possible? Could the legends be more than stories? What kind of monster is it? What kind of monster am I? "It must be. Her symptoms, the timing. What else could it be?" Carlyle was stammering, an uncharacteristic sound. His voice rarely wavered or hesitated with doubt. But now— "I never thought it was a risk. I never thought to warn you. Edward, I'm so sorry." He ended in a whisper. Self-blame and guilt were thick in his troubled voice. "And Bella?" What would this mean for her? I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her against my side. Her warmth was like an anchor, protection from the chilling darkness that was swirling in the recesses of my mind. "We don't have a choice. We need to get it out. At the rate it's growing. Edward, you need to come straight home. Can you leave today?" He was trying to modulate the tone of his voice, but remorse and fear tinged every word. "Yes, I will." My thumb automatically found the call end button. I was dialing again instantly, determined not to lose a single second.
"What did Carlyle say?"
Bella asked impatiently. "He thinks you're pregnant." My voice sounded dead and cold, even to me, like the voice of a corpse echoing up from an open grave. Bella's heart jumped as my words confirmed her fears. Mixed in with the natural sound of her body, I heard again the insidious flutter, the heart of a parasite, growing stronger by the second. I pressed the phone against my ear, listening to the monotonous ringing, wishing someone would answer, but knowing I would have to navigate an automated system to find a real person to assist me.
"Who are you calling now?"
she wanted to know. "The airport. We're going home." The fantasy world we had been living in for the past 9 days was shattered. All of my dreams of an ideal life in New England, going to college, being like a normal, happy newlywed couple, they were all obliterated, with the revelation that I was not sterile after all. Hadn't I wished out loud that Bella and I could have the potential to be parents? How could I have wished for such a thing? Of course, I had imagined myself human, fathering a human child, with Bella's fair skin, soulful brown eyes, and mahogany locks. That had been my dream, my desire. But not this. Never this. I rarely had the need to utilize the full vampiric capabilities of my multifaceted mind, but now I found them rigorously tested. A portion of my mind locked on the sound of Bella's heart, possessively counting every beat. How precious that sound was, now that her body was in danger. Another part analyzed every movement, every sound her body made. I was intimately aware of the rushing blood through her veins, the air sweeping in and out of her lungs, even the subtle whisper of her hair brushing against her shoulders and back when she moved. I locked in on the slight fluttering sound that was almost completely hidden beneath the louder whooshing of blood through her system. The monster's heart was beating strongly. A hissing breath escaped my lips. I hated it more completely than I had ever hated another living creature. It threatened Bella's life by its very existence, and by hating it, I had no choice but to hate myself, its creator. By their fruits you shall know them. Evil begets evil. While these thoughts were streaming through my mind, I was waiting impatiently for the phone to connect. I had dialed the airport concierge. I had neither the time nor the patience to deal with the travel agency. I did not care about the cost, the type of aircraft, or even the airline used. I only wanted the fastest route home. Sooner than I expected, I was connected with a woman who claimed to want to help me find and book a flight. I had only blurted out the beginning of my request, and she was already trying to convince me to accept a promotional travel package. I dampened the growl that threatened to escape my throat. Over the next 73 minutes, I kept up a constant stream of conversation in Portuguese, finally making some progress with our flight arrangements. While my mind careened through dozens of different thoughts, my body was making quick work of repacking our suitcases. Bella stood hesitantly off to the side, watching my frenzied actions with awe and a touch of fear. I threw an outfit onto the bed, and was grateful when she immediately began to dress herself without prompting, while my flurry of activity and the tense conversation with the concierge continued. Bella made her way into the kitchen and stood, staring pensively out of the window. I heard the crackle of a plastic package and dull crunching sound as she ate some sort of snack. Her voice murmured softly, but my incoherent mind made little sense of her words. Every last scrap of clothing was packed, and our travel arrangements were confirmed and paid for. Direct flights were rare, and the airline had displaced 2 other travelers to make room for us. I didn't even pause to question the cost. I would have paid anything to get us home immediately. I snapped my phone shut, silenced the ringer, and approached Bella cautiously. "Bella?" I addressed her warily, afraid to startle her. The sight of her, standing in silence, with tears coursing down her face, was enough for me to want to take my own life. "Bella, are you in pain?" I crossed to her side, cupping her stricken face gently with my hands.
"No, no."
Her eyes looked so lost. I pulled her close to me, needing to feel her safe in my arms, even if I knew it was only an illusion. I murmured soothing words of encouragement. "Don't be afraid. We'll be home in 16 hours. You'll be fine. Carlisle will be ready when we get there. We'll take care of this, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine."
"Take care of this? What do you mean?"
Her voice was so full of pain and bewilderment, I could barely bring myself to look into her eyes, but I gathered my strength and pretended to be brave for her. Leaning back, I looked directly into her eyes, willing her to be strong and unafraid. "We're going to get that thing out before it can hurt any part of you. Don't be scared. I won't let it hurt you."
"That thing?"
she gasped. I knew the full impact of this nightmare had not fully sunk in. I was formulating a reassuring response when I was shocked by a gruff voice speaking directly in my mind. "More eggs, more eggs. What odd diets these Americans have." "Damn it," I cursed. How had I not heard the sound of the boat arriving? "I forgot Gustavo was due today. I'll get rid of him and be right back." I left Bella alone in the kitchen and sped toward the front door. All I needed to do was postpone their visit until tomorrow, and change my request from cleaning and restocking to a thorough cleaning and securing the property for future use. 2 heartbeats and 2 sets of footsteps on the stairs had me cursing under my breath as I opened the front door. It was then that I registered a softer but highly suspicious mental voice. I hissed softly. Cora had not completely dismissed her fears after all. I opened the door with a carefully impassive expression. "I'm sorry that I didn't think to call you sooner. My wife and I had an unexpected change of plans, and we will be returning to America today. I would appreciate it if you could return tomorrow and clean and secure the property." Gustavo's mind registered shock and surprise, but not suspicion. Cora's thoughts immediately caught my attention, and I suppressed a growl. She was far too close to the truth. Before she even spoke, my eyes were drawn to the steaming dish she held before her. Fish, onions, and some local herbs.
"But, sir, I made a special dinner for you. You and your lovely bride must be tired of cooking every day. Allow me to share one of my grandmother's favorite recipes. This is my gift to you."
I was impressed again by her ability to squash her own fears and bravely challenge me when I knew she suspected my true nature. She was surreptitiously trying to peek past my figure, searching for any sign of Bella. In her mind, she was imagining Bella's body, lifeless and bleeding streams of scarlet onto the white silk sheets in the first bedroom. Gustavo was apathetic, waiting patiently for his partner to complete her self-imposed errand. Cora met my gaze, barely flinching as my amber eyes bore into her deep brown ones. She shrank back slightly, but then squared her shoulders and took a step toward me.
"At least let me put it in the kitchen for you. You will be thanking me later."
I doubted that. I gritted my teeth, but stepped back and turned on my heel. "This way, then," I growled. I led her into the kitchen. Bella stood in the exact spot where I had left her, but her cheeks were damp with fresh tears. My anger and self-hatred grew unchecked. I wiped the moisture tenderly from her cheeks and whispered in her ear, "She's insisting on leaving the food she brought. She made us dinner." It's an excuse. She wants to make sure I haven't killed you yet." Yet. My own words foreshadowed my greatest fear, chilling me more than an Arctic breeze. Cora's thoughts were racing as she turned the corner. It was starting to sink into her mind that if I was what she suspected, nothing could stop me from killing her and Gustavo if I chose to. I could sink their boat and make it look like an accident at sea. Nobody would ever know or suspect the truth. The relief she felt when she saw Bella was short-lived. Her eyes darted back and forth between us. In her mind, I saw that she noticed Bella's pallid skin and tear-filled eyes. Now she was concerned on a more natural level for Bella's health. As with her previous visit, a rational explanation for my antagonistic attitude began to surface, and she started to regret provoking me to anger.
"She is unwell. She should not be traveling,"
she muttered under her breath in Portuguese as she set the covered dish on the counter. "I think I can decide what is best for my wife's health. You've delivered your gift. Thank you. You can leave now." My tone was clipped, angrier than I intended. The strain of this delay was too much. I could not afford to lose another minute. Cora's shoulders stiffened, but she accepted my rebuke silently and turned to leave. Her movement stirred the air, sending the pungent smell of fish and onions at us. Bella tensed and gagged, her body heaving violently as she spun to release the contents of her stomach into the sink. Helplessly, I held her hair back from her face and whispered words of comfort in her ear. I felt so hypocritical, the cause of her pain and sickness, encouraging her to be strong. Impatiently, not even considering my audience, I snatched the offending dish from the counter and thrust it into the refrigerator. The dish was scalding hot, and the flesh of my hands protested. I should have grasped it by the handles, but I was beyond caring. Bella was bent over the sink, gasping and shaking. Her knuckles were whitened from her death grip on the edge of the counter. Her face was hot and clammy with sweat, so I ran my cool fingers across her skin to bring her some relief. She sagged into my supporting embrace. Her hands shook as she rinsed out her mouth, spitting weakly into the sink. I turned her around, wrapping my arms protectively around her. She rested her head against my shoulder, breathing slowly and deliberately. I thought I knew pain. I thought I had experienced the most nerve-shattering agony at Jane's sadistic hands. I thought hearing that Bella had thrown herself from a cliff in grief was the most torturous experience I could ever have. However, my mind and body had grown in their capacity for joy, love, and pleasure during our time on the island. I was quickly realizing that the sword cut both ways. I had never felt such pleasure, but I had also never felt such pain. But what chilled me the most was the knowledge that my torture had only just begun. Bella clutched her swelling stomach, the center of our agony. Cora's gasp forced my mind to focus on her perception of the drama unfolding before her. She had seen my inhuman speed. Her eyes, wide with shock and terror, were fixed on Bella's hands, clasped over the bulge beneath her shirt. Images flitted through her mind rapidly, but three stood out from the rest, accompanied by the violence of her mental shrieking. The crude drawing of a vampire holding his victim's body. A circle of Indian children, gathered around a wizened elder, their faces frozen in horrified fascination, and a child's nightmare, a reaction to the ancient stories. In the nightmare, a young Indian woman clutched her bruised, distended belly and fell to the ground, crying out in agony as sharp rips and tears echoed through the jungle clearing. I could not stem the force of her thoughts, and I gasped weakly. The images in her mind drove the air from my lungs. Instinct took over, and I stepped in front of Bella, as if I could protect her from the images and the fate they implied. My movement spurred Cora into action, and she advanced on me, screaming her accusations shrilly. Her fist was raised, as if she intended to strike me down with the force of her anger. I felt my spirit being crushed beneath the weight of her words. Everything she said was true. I was a monster, a demon, a murderer. My self-loathing was unparalleled, but the feel of Bella clutching my arm forced me to think of her. I needed to know how much of Cora's words and memories were based in fact, and how much were embellished legends. There was so little air in my lungs. My chest didn't want to expand to accept more. My voice was low as I pleaded with her. Her knowledge could possibly offer some help for the dilemma that Carlyle and I faced. I spoke to her in the language of her mother's people, the Tacuna Indians. "The legend you speak of, the Libishomen, the women, I need to know, are they real?" The guttural, primitive language halted her tirade, and her face and mind froze in awe. No sooner had she registered my fluent grasp on her native tongue than she spat out a long stream of words in the same language.
"The legends? Yes, they are real. The Libishomen is a demon. He drinks the blood of his victims, taking their life force into his unholy body to feed his power. Once, long ago, he preyed upon my people, and we do not forget. Our daughters are cautioned at a young age to be wary of his pale skin, perfect face, and beautiful voice. Skin and face and voice like yours. Are you like him?"
I had never revealed my identity to a human before Bella. Our survival depended on secrecy, but there were no secrets here. Cora's suspicious mind and bravery had forced the truth to be known. Helpless and hopeless, I nodded assent. She recoiled and crossed herself, warding off the taint of my evil presence with a symbol of salvation. How far my hopes had fallen! Salvation was a bitter thought. My earlier aspirations of redemption were a mockery of the truth. I was nothing more than a demon. But Bella, my beautiful angel, should have no part in my damnation. I reached out to Cora, desperate to know what would happen to Bella. The image of the Indian girl, crying out alone in the jungle, replayed over and over in my mind. "Please, my wife, what will happen to her?" I held my hand against Bella's cheek. She watched my actions with confusion, her eyes flitting back and forth between my face and Bella's.
"Your wife? But you have made her with child. You do not love her. Your kind does not know love. You are a murderer."
"I love her more than my life. She is my life. Please, I beg you, please tell me what your legends say. What will happen to my wife?" Doubt was strong on her face and in her mind. She studied Bella's confused expression and evaluated my pain-twisted features. She noted my protective stance and the way Bella clung to my arm, leaning toward me with no trace of fear or revulsion evident in her posture. Compassion for Bella drew her forward involuntarily, overcoming her fear of me. Using both hands, Cora mimed a rapidly expanding stomach. The mental picture that accompanied it sickened me. In her mind, the doomed girl of her childhood nightmare lay helpless while her stomach erupted violently. Bella flinched at her gesture, and my stomach lurched sickeningly. I was still as a stone, watching Cora take several deliberate steps toward me.
"How long ago did she conceive?"
16 days, we think, when we first arrived.
"And how has she been feeling?"
"Hungry, tired. She has been gaining weight rapidly these past several days, but I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't know this could happen. She says she felt it move." She flinched in revulsion.
"You know our language. Do you know our legends?"
"I knew of the Libishomen stories. I suspected that whoever he was like me. But I didn't know of the woman, the one I couldn't finish."
"Did you know what your seed would do to her?"
My seed. My jaw seemed to be carved from ice. With a great effort, I responded with a single word. "No." Cora looked at me with pity. Her instincts rebelled against believing or trusting in me. However, she recognized my true fear for Bella, and regarded us sadly. Her face was devoid of hope. "In your legends, did the woman live?" I knew the answer, but I felt compelled to ask. Cora paused before slowly shaking her head. Even knowing what her response would be, the answer tore at my insides. It took everything within my power to form my next words. Bella looked up at me while I spoke, and the tension in her body made it clear she saw my pain and despair. "Then, Bella?" Cora took the final steps to bring her right before us. She sighed, laying one of her small, work-worn hands over Bella's, and breathed a single word.
Morte.
With her head and shoulders bent beneath the weight of her grief and pity, Cora turned and left us. I was thankful for one thing, that Gustavo had returned to the boat long before our argument. There was only one witness to my damnation, and I was confident in her silence. This was no consolation, but it was one less thing to drag my thoughts away from Bella. She was still and silent in my arms, waiting for me to move or speak. Even the sound of the motor sputtering to life and carrying the boat away was unable to rouse me from my horrified stupor. That final word, morte, hung in the air, evil and oppressive. Cora's story was only a legend, I told myself, but the facts and similarities were irrefutable. I could only hope that Carlyle and I were in time. We needed to go, to take action without delay. What must Bella be thinking now? How much did she understand? Bella turned away from me. My hand darted out to grasp her shoulder before she could take a second step. The thought of losing sight of her made me distraught. "Where are you going?" I whispered.
"To brush my teeth again."
Her matter-of-fact response did little to appease me. There was a rigid set to her shoulders, and a tension around her eyes that made me wonder. Bella was very perceptive. I had felt her reactions to much of our conversation, and morte was not difficult to translate. Desperate to put her at ease, I blurted out, "Don't worry about what she said. It's nothing but legends, old lies for the sake of entertainment."
"I didn't understand anything."
Bella's words rang with truth, but she did not meet my anxious gaze. Her ability to lie had improved over the years, but she could not fool me. I knew her too well. Unwilling to start an argument or contradict her in any way, I did the only thing I could do. "I packed your toothbrush. I'll get it for you." I walked to the bedroom and dug through her suitcase to get her toiletries.
"Are we leaving soon?"
Bella called after me. I detected the faintest note of tension in her voice. She should have been hysterical. She should have been cursing me, tearing her hair, crying uncontrollably. That's what I wanted to do. "As soon as you're done," I replied softly. I was lost in thought, trying to find a way, any way, to get us home sooner. I would hijack a plane and fly it myself if I thought it would help. I paced silently, waiting for her to return the toothbrush to me. As soon as she placed the damp toothbrush back in my hand, I leapt into action. "I'll get the bags into the boat." As I spoke, I gathered our suitcases. Bella's hesitant voice halted me.
"Edward?"
I turned back, confused by the tone of her voice. "Yes?"
"Could you pack some of the food? You know, in case I get hungry again."
My fierce determination, my impatience, my self-hatred, all seemed selfish in the face of her simple request. I loved this woman. Anything I could do to offer her comfort instead of increasing her pain and distress, I would do, gladly. "Of course. Don't worry about a thing. We'll get to Carlisle in just a few hours, really. This will all be over soon," I assured her. She nodded bravely. As I fled the room, I heard her begin to talk to herself again. My eyes and throat burned with impotent fury. She was so brave. I wish I could be as strong as her, but even wishing that, I knew I could never be. I stowed the suitcases behind the seats in the boat, and then reached for my phone to call Carlyle. I knew Alice would see us coming, but I needed to speak to him one more time, for strength and reassurance. My father always knew what to say, to encourage me through any tribulation. My phone was not in my pocket, and I was certain I had not packed it in my suitcase. Or had I? With a growl, I pulled my suitcase back onto the dock, flung it open, and searched through the hastily folded clothes. I had almost decided to search Bella's suitcase also, when I remembered seeing it on the countertop as I raced from the house. I made short work of repacking my suitcase, and returned to the house to pack some food for Bella. My call would just have to wait. The small dock was part of an idyllic setting. Crystal-clear tropical waters swirled around the supporting piers in eddies of turquoise and green. The boat rocked gently on tiny swells, occasionally bumping against the padded siding. This entire scene bore such a sharp contrast to the dry ache of despair in my throat. How ironic. This was not my paradise. Honeymoon? No. This was a perversion of nature, and Bella was paying the price for my selfishness. Nothing was worth this pain. Jacob was right. I should have never have come back. Everything about me was a danger to her. I was not her guardian. I was her curse. I leapt into the boat, my body shaking with the intensity of my self-hatred. Swiftly I loosened the moorings before approaching Bella. Cautiously I lifted her by the waist, settling her on the boat's shifting deck. Did she flinch from my touch? Her eyes never met mine. Silky waves of dark brown hair hid her face from me, and she silently took her seat, lost in her own thoughts. I stiffened my shoulders against the crushing guilt. There was no thrill as the wind of our passage whipped my hair into a bronze tangle. I felt no exhilaration from the throbbing roar of the engine or the sound of the propeller tearing through the water. I was fleeing from a nightmare too terrible to face. I was running, but it pursued me. There was no escape. I glanced across at Bella, huddled silently in her seat, the monster inside of her growing in strength, determined to tear her life from her, an aberration that would destroy her as it pursued a twisted existence. It must be stopped. I could not let that thing take her from me. Behind us, storm clouds gathered in the east. A squall line advanced, wiping all memory of the tropical sun from the suffering skies.